Hi guys, welcome back to the Butterfly Effect podcast. We are still not bitten. We are back with episode 3 in Harm's Way. As always, we're going to just get stuck in straight with the choices. Choice 1, Jack. Did you help Sarah with her chores when you were picking berries?
Yes, I did. So I think the stream voted to help, which was very good of them, because I know in my blind playthrough I chose not to. So yeah, I mean, it's one of them. I don't think it particularly matters because, like, we know what follows, right? Carver comes storming in. He has a bit of a row with Reggie. And it feels like that if you go to help Sarah, then yours obviously doesn't get done, and obviously if you don't, then Sarah doesn't get hers done. So it's either way. It's one of them choices. It doesn't matter too much, but you know.
I did see that in your stream because I was like, you've been playing Savage Clem, and I was wondering, like, surely Jack doesn't help with the chores here, but of course it's your stream that weighs in and makes, Jack nice in a Telltale game, because that's not going to happen like alone, is it? No, but I get you. I think in my blind playthrough, I chose to help because I feel like, Clem's a badass, Sarah isn't. I feel like any Carver hatred, I feel like Clem could take that. So I was like, yeah, sure. And I did feel for her as well in light of just what happened after, Dad was ordered to hit her, in pretty brutal scene. Going forward, the second choice is, did you tell Bonnie about Luke? We'll speak more about Bonnie in detail in this episode because she is quite interesting. But yeah, what did you do here, lad?
Yeah, and we voted. We chose not to tell Bonnie about Luke. And the thing is, like, you can understand why, because she was in that position. Like, episode 2, she completely, lied to us, basically saying that she was just looking for some food when really it was like the preempting of bringing Carver and his band in to, start killing us off and kidnapping us. So, immediately there's a strike against her name there. Then she tries this whole one-to-one BS where she's trying to, like, get round you and say that Carver's not all that bad. So, like, when you do have that upper hand with Luke, I thought, no way. And again, it's a Telltale. It doesn't really matter because Luke always gets found out. But I don't know if you know, like, if you do confide in Bonnie, is that how they find out about Luke? Because she tells them, or does it play out the same way? Do you know?
So yeah, it's a nothing choice, mate. Bonnie is a good person in terms of, like, she always will side with your group, and she sort of, I think it's the events that unfold, like, with Sarah getting hit, Reggie, getting pushed off the roof, that makes Bonnie really truly see who Carver is, and then she wants out and she wants to join you. So I feel like telling her, confiding in her, can, like, help your relationship a little bit more, but I don't think it leads to too much. So it is a bit of a nothing choice.
I was going to add something to this bit. Maybe you could say it's a little bit of a plot flaw, but obviously we know that this group has been incarcerated with Carver and his band before, right? We know that Bonnie knows the group. So, like, when Bonnie approached the lodge back in episode 2 to, take some food, which clearly was BS, it was a bit of a risk, wasn't it? Because surely she was very fortunate that Clem, Kenny, and I believe Walt was there outside to meet her. Because if any of the other group were there, they would know who she is and that she was part of, like, Carver's crew. So I sort of thought back to that during that conversation. I was like, that's a little bit of a plot flaw there. Like, I don't know if they thought that through.
Yeah, like, clearly she's startled and she's like, oh god, like, they caught me. But, like, yeah, like, all it takes is Kenny or Walter saying, oh yeah, there was this redhead, and I can't remember if she drops her name at any point, but yeah, you could easily have put 2 and 2 together. But yeah, like, very fortunate that, yeah, it wasn't Luke, Nick, Rebecca, Alvin that walk outside. Yeah, no, big time, lad. No, that's a very good point. Then we get this whole story out with, stealing the walkie-talkie for Luke, and then they count it, they find it's gone missing. Did you admit to stealing it, mate?
Hell no. I stayed silent. I think, again, was this one of them where I asked the stream? There are certain choices in this where you don't know whether they are part of the 5 at the end or not. But I didn't. I just chose to stay silent. And then in the end, like, Kenny steps forward with the walkie-talkie, and then that's how the whole him getting beat the crap out of starts, basically. But yeah, no, I didn't. What happens if you do admit to it? Does Carver like strike you, or?
No, it may be a bit of a nothing choice again, which is a common theme actually. So maybe that can be a critique aimed at this episode. But I'm pretty sure if you pipe up, Kenny just will beat you to it and be no, I've got it. You know, so it's kind of one of those ones where maybe I think it says Kenny will remember this that you tried to, but ultimately Kenny will take the brunt, and it always will be Kenny that has to get beat and then eventually lose an eye. Choice 4 again kind of like is a bit of an aftermath from this, where ultimately you overpower Carver and Kenny, you know, gets revenge and, you know, kills him, and you can choose to watch the show. What did you do?
Yeah, chose to watch it. I'm pretty sure we was speaking to it was speaking to Sonia, I think, you know, because she'd been playing the games back, and like she was saying how like she walked away in that particular moment. So a part of me wanted to show that to everybody anyway, because that is what I did in my blind playthrough, and God, like it's a really gruesome fight, isn't it? Like with that Kenny just beating the pulp out of Carver, like the fact his face is completely gone by the end. It's got to go down as that one of the most brutal deaths in the Walking Dead series for me, and it's literally just a man punching another one to death. Really, really hitting stuff. But you know what? While we're on this particular choice, and like, you know, while I've got it fresh in my mind, how do you feel about Carver dying at the end of episode 3, mate? Because I know I've got some thoughts on it.
I've got a lot to say on Carver, big time. So are you referring to the fact about how he was sort of handled and his short screen time?
Basically, yeah.
Yeah, like clearly, you know, in the game for not long enough, because I feel like everything good about season 2, all the best bits are kind of the bits that evolve around Carver, maybe. So like, not only that, but I feel like Michael Madsen, really chilling performance. And I really enjoyed last episode and this one. And I'm not saying the episode goes down, or like the series goes downhill from here, but it just was a lot better with Carver as an antagonist. And I feel like maybe, I know this is asking Telltale for maybe too much here, but I feel like maybe you could have had a choice where you can restrain Kenny from beating him up, and then he could die there, but there's an equal path where you don't and you leave him there, and maybe the zombies overhaul like Hal's Hardware store, and it's not that like you don't know if he dies or not, and then maybe like he can come at the end, and maybe you can have him there instead of like, you know, the Russian standoff in like one of those final episodes, something along those lines. But yeah, I just feel like writing him out too soon might have been a mistake for season 2.
I do agree, and I feel like, I know, is it because that it's Michael Madsen? Like, did he cost a lot, and therefore, like, he couldn't stick around for too long? But
it's harsh. Knowing Telltale, like having to cut their staff, Michael Madsen's probably a part of that, mate.
Yeah, people lost their jobs just to fucking get him in the game. Yeah, so swiftly moving on. But yeah, like, I think I had an idea, and I feel like it would perhaps help a later choice further on in the game. So like, I would have it so that you could perhaps kill him there, or you could have the choice where like he becomes your prisoner, and maybe he could like start sowing seeds amongst the group, like when you're on your walks and stuff, trying to like, you know, basically stir the pot. I was just thinking like of that lake scene, you know how like Luke just sort of, you know, the ice starts cracking, he falls in. I feel like a really good choice would be, do you go to help Luke, or, you know, maybe Carver starts to get away, he starts legging it, or do you go after Carver? I feel like maybe that would be a good choice, because then you could actually have an ending where Carver just gets away and lives, or it could be that sort of thing where, but I want to restrain Carver and therefore Luke dies. I feel like that would have been like a little bit more of a more acceptable way of sort of seeing the character out, because yeah, it really was a really short runtime for him.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I'll talk about it later after the 5th choice, but like what I will say about Carver is that I think in the whole Telltale sort of you know, Walking Dead series, I think Carver might be the greatest villain there is. I feel like Lily comes back in season 4, but it's just a little cheap the way, you know, we don't see much of her and she's just totally different. I feel like New Frontier, like, I don't know, we don't really have that. I'd say Carver was just such a cool character, and it sucks that we only really get 2 episodes of him. So yeah, no, I really agree on that front. We'll just quickly go into we'll quickly segue into the final choice of the episode, which is the one that concludes the episode. You know, this is the scene where you're trying to get away with, you know, covered in the guts and stuff, and you have to go through the horde. But then, you know, the House Hardware people are shooting at the zombies. Carlos gets shot. Sarah screams. It all goes to shit a little bit. And then Sarita's there getting bit on her wrist, and you have the choice to cut her arm off or kill the zombie that's bit her. What did you do in the stream, mate?
In the stream, chose not to chop off her arm, so we went straight for the zombie's head. But I do remember in my blind playthrough, I did just go straight for the arm. I was thinking, you know, like Lee, end of season 1, perhaps there's a chance, you know, if you can get it off early enough, that she won't sort of succumb to the infection and then obviously become a walker. So yeah, that's what my thinking was, mate. But yeah, just went straight for the zombie in the stream.
Yeah, I'm glad you did that as well, because I always go for the wrist, because I'm like, yeah, it's Walking Dead knowledge. If you're a big Walking Dead fan, you know that's how you stop infections. So it's one of those ones where, you know, that is what I did. But funny enough, you can't really find out what happens till the next episode. So we're going to have to go more into that at the start of episode 4, I'm afraid. But no, I do get the school of thought. I mean, that is the logic. Those are the choices, lad. There's a lot to discuss because so much happens in this episode. It's not like last episode where it's like, you know, lodge, bridge, you know, ski house, you know, showdown. It is very much like you're in this one location, but there's just so many little bits, because it's like, you know, you go to work, you sleep, you go to work, you sleep. And, you know, there's like the whole lorry scene at the start. There's so much to dive into. I'm going to start it with Carver, because we've discussed like the writing of Carver and kind of like how we would have liked more of him. I just want to kind of briefly outline just what a fascinating character he is, because they could have easily have just cheaply wrote a villain that was like, oh, I want to be like the best, sort of like, I want to kill all the other humans, I want to just, you know, like be like the best dictator there is, kind of thing. But what I find fascinating about Carver is that he doesn't see himself as evil. He thinks he's doing what's best. He has this kind of whole philosophy of how you need to eliminate the weak to be strong. And it's why it's so fascinating, his dynamic with Clem. And it's the thing you were referring to in the last episode, where when you squared off to him as badass Clem, he liked that. And he even refers to it in an interview, you know, where he's like kind of interviewing you, and he's like, I like you. And then he has this whole speech like, yeah, the youth of the future, we need more people like you at my side, we're gonna like rule this place. And he almost like sees this potential in you. Yeah. And the other thing I kind of want to mention as well is that even in the face of death, when he's getting beaten by Kenny, and if you choose to watch, he says, nah, this little girl's tough, yeah, she needs to do this. And even like when he's dying, he's still praising you. And it's crazy, because it's like he's this clearly evil character who's killing people in front of you, but he kind of sort of like, he doesn't think what he's doing's wrong. And I find this whole philosophy of him really fascinating. I don't know if you thought the same, mate.
I do. And honestly, you're so right. He's like the hero of the other side, isn't he? You know, he's not like that sort of typical villain where everything's, but he genuinely thinks that he's doing the right thing. And you know what? I mean, while we're talking about this, what I really like, and it was actually, I think it was a criticism that I brought up when we did season 1 analysis, you know, is that there was that failed potential of the whole Crawford thing. You know, because we know what the Crawford thing in season 1 was. It was like this band where, you know, if you were weak or, do you know what I mean, you were outcasts in society. And that actually got explored in this season. And I thought that was a really smart move by Telltale, because, like I say, I do feel it was, there was unfulfilled potential there. And it really does succumb, like this quote he says, basically, weakness, incompetence, it puts us all at risk. And the more I was playing episode, especially when I was like looking back at it, there are like two quite like philosophical opposing views in this one, without it getting too deep. Obviously you've got Carver's there, as like the dictator who genuinely, obviously his methods, it takes things too far, but he does basically want people to harden up, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Then you've got someone like Reggie, and I've got this down here, like, you know, as like a talking point. Does Reggie have a point? And I'm on about like when you first meet him, and they're obviously all in captivity. He says, "Guys, we might as well stay here." You know, he's basically saying that he's recommending that they stay as slaves to Carver. He's basically saying like, we've got solar panels for electricity, we've got all this food, all this drink, we're defended from the walkers. I almost want to like put it to you, mate. You've got like these two opposing sort of like things here with Carver and Reggie. I was just going to say, like, do you think Reggie has a point? Like, because if they did leave, and they are out in the middle of nowhere, they've got zero supplies, X, Y, and Z. I just find it like quite a little interesting little debate, you know?
Yeah, I mean, if I was in the apocalypse, I feel like I actually would want to be a part of a big group. Strength in numbers. I know it's like more mouths to feed, but if you kind of start rebuilding a civilization, that is kind of how you go about it. And yeah, of course, like Carver's methods are brutal, but it's just that whole interesting thing where like I know a bunch of people in my life that probably would actually sympathize with Carver. Maybe not the whole murder kind of thing, but it is sort of do or die in his eyes. And yeah, he goes overboard throwing weak people off roofs and, you know, kind of these little brutal torture methods he has going on. But the whole kind of thing of, you know, which he's trying to do, build the civilization. Yeah, I know people who would actually agree with him, as maybe as fucked up as that sounds.
That's worrying.
Yeah, but it's kind of those ones, isn't it? And your point about Reggie, yeah, like maybe I feel like if I was a prisoner for Carver, I feel like I'd just like, you know, I'd be like, well, I'm getting fed, I'll work, you know, I get through my day, and then I'll sort of just see if I can be like maybe a valuable member. I mean, like if you know, like it did get too brutal, I kind of get why this group wanted to escape, so I probably would eventually get out if I saw the methods were that brutal, or I would potentially try and overthrow him, you know. But yeah, no, Carver's such a fascinating character, hence back to our point why it's a shame he was written off so early.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, obviously, you know, we'll, you know, quickly mention like Reggie's death, absolutely brutal and unexpected. And I think, you know, again, it comes back to the same point I was saying. It's almost like a nice character gets introduced, like Walt in the previous one, and then Telltale, nah, we can't have them sticking around too much. They're too good of an influence, and then they're just bumped off straight away. And it was, it's funny. It's a big encompassing point. I still don't know how I feel about this episode, whether I like it or dislike it, because up to that point, it felt like something needed to happen because there was a lot of standing around and talking and dialogue scenes, and that woke you up. You know, when like he's just bursting through the door and he's getting thrown off the rooftop, you're like, oh shit, like, you know, Carver means business. He's not, you know, pissing around. But like, it's, you know, there's something about this episode. It doesn't quite ever hit that point where I'm like really on the edge. It's like there is a lot of sort of just walking around and chatting, and yeah, I'm so 50-50 about the whole thing.
No, I get you. I think it's not as strong as episode 2.
No,
I do have a feeling it yeah, and like the linearity definitely harms it, but it's odd because there's a lot of stuff I really like about this episode as well, like in terms of like the location, the introduction of some characters. There are some kind of really cool crescendo moments. It's just, yeah, it's the linearity that harms it. Like even when we were going through the choices just now, you could argue a lot of them are nothing choices. I will segue. We spoke about Reggie a little bit there, mate. What did you make of him as a character?
Yeah, like I say, I liked Reggie, and I think that was the most important point, was the fact that he raised, you know, guys, should we actually stay here, you know? And but even like moving forward to like the bit where you're up in like the little greenhouse, and there's that moment where like it made me laugh, where doesn't he like just tap Clem on the head or something, or on the shoulder, and then Clem like looks at him funny, he's like, oh, that was awkward, and then he just walks away. There's just something like so amicable and like, you know, innocent about Reggie that it's then obviously horrible, like with the way he goes out. Again, a character that I'd have liked to have seen stay, further into the game. I think that his character was someone that, I was more familiar and would like to stick around than say someone like Mike, for example. Mike never really stuck out to me in the group in particular. So yeah, I quite liked Reggie, mate. What about you?
Yeah, big time. It's funny. I never knew this, but like replaying it again, I'm like, I really recognise his voice, and I looked up the actor. His name's Kumail Nanjiani. I know him from things like Community and Portlandia. He's in a big thing called The Big Sick. He's in the upcoming Ghostbusters movie. If you look up a picture of him, you will recognise the face. He's a really famous Pakistani American actor, I believe. So it's really interesting, not only Michael Madsen, but that they got this guy as well. So it shows you that Telltale really were kind of pulling up like the cards for this one. Yeah. But yeah, like you said, he just was a breath of fresh air. Really fun dialogue where he just pats Clem on the head, and everything about him. And it's cool as well that you got another character who is an amputee survivor. I really like that. But yeah, I think he serves as a ploy of introducing someone nice, kill him off, and then it kind of makes you fear Carver that bit more. So yeah, no. Yeah, big time. Good character to have here.
Yeah, he was armless.
He was armless, yes.
I hated it.
Oh.
Oh man, yeah, of course. Oh man. One thing I want to mention as well, because we've got a few characters to talk about. We might as well chat about Mike, who you brought up as well, lad. So yeah, do you reckon bit of a nothing character? Didn't need to be there, maybe?
For me, yeah. I never quite got Mike, really. He was always sort of on the outskirts. He never really come forward front and centre, even when the numbers started to get whittled down and you've got that, thing obviously leaping forward into episode 4 or 5 actually, with like the whole situation with the car. It was him and Bonnie. I didn't really look at him as like a valuable member anyway. There is a bit where like him and Kenny are bickering, aren't they, about like, and I've actually written this down here, where like again they're both like sidestepping responsibility, and it comes back to that point that we've mentioned countless times, same as in the stream, where it always falls to Clem, and like Kenny's like, oh, why doesn't Clem do it? And you can actually say back to him like, oh, why don't you do it, Kenny? And he's like, oh, because you took the radio and you did this and you did that. And I'm like, yeah, exactly, I've done fucking everything. But yeah, like Mike, he doesn't make the grade for me, mate. He's not like a memorable character in my eyes.
No, for sure. One thing that felt really disjointed to me is, when you first meet him, he's like, oh yeah, get to bed. I'm trying to sleep, And then he's like this really kind of cold character, and I'm like, oh cool, I want to get to know this guy a bit more. And then like, I don't know, he bickers with Kenny. Side note, I've seen people mention Kenny's racist because he bickers with Lee and Mike. I would just retaliate that Kenny bickers with absolutely fucking everyone. Luke in the last episode. So I don't think he's racist. I just think Kenny's hot-headed. I think that's a better way of putting it. Yeah. But yeah, with Mike, later on, you're planning this escape thing with like Luke, on the outside, and then he's just randomly a part of the group, and then he's suddenly happy to help you. And there's no kind of bridge as to why he decides to help. 1 second he just dislikes your group, he's not a part of it. And then you snap your fingers and he's around the fire with you all. And I don't know, it just felt really disjointed to me. And I saw in your stream, and apologies, I can't remember who this was, but someone did point out that there was an abandoned storyline, apparently, where he is one of the bandits at the start that chases you and Krista. Yeah. And then apparently the subplot got abandoned. And I'm like, I don't know why it got abandoned, but that would have been interesting. And it kind of does explain why his character felt disjointed there, mate.
Yeah, I think it was Anthony that mentioned that, and I feel like the potent question being, if you took Mike out of those scenes, if you took Mike out of the game, would it really have been any different? Would he have been missed? For me, no. That sort of tells you everything you need to know. Like, there wasn't much depth from what I can remember, in terms of like one-to-ones with him, where you get to know him a little bit, his background and stuff like that. He was just one of the crew. So yeah, he's definitely a character, mate, where if we did like a tier list for, season 2, it'd be sort of like, right near the bottom for me.
Nah, I do agree. Unlike another character who is the other prisoner we get in the cell here, Now we know firsthand, mate, that I am a big fan of this character, the quiet girl Jane. Now, like, I think we'll talk more about her throughout the other episodes because, as we'll learn, you know, she massively clashes and she's a part of this big final choice. I'll keep it to episode 3 at the minute, though. But I just want to say, I loved everything about Jane. Like, when you introduced, you know, to her, Reggie's kind of saying, oh yeah, like, that girl there is really weird. We found her outside covered in like guts and stuff. And the moment you hear that, like, obviously us playing as Clem in season 1 episode 5, we know that that is a legit tactic. So you kind of just clock on like, okay, this girl knows what she's doing, she's smart. And then kind of like you go throughout the episode and then like she explains, she pipes up like, yeah, we could use this to escape. And then when like Clem kind of does that little praise to Lee, like, yeah, Lee knew about it, this is what we used to escape the Marsh house. And then Jane kind of just looks at you and you almost get that like mutual respect. We'll later learn that Jane had like a little sister, and I feel like she sort of sees Clem as that replacement. And I feel like, because we're in this clearly incompetent group, right, where we've got trigger happy like Nick, like a group like Carlos who like shelters his daughter, like they're not the best group. Like, it's a miracle they survived this long. They probably have survived this long because they've been at Hyle's hardware store for that long, right? And I feel like you're surrounded by like sort of apocalypse imbeciles in a way, and I feel like when you sort of see Jane, you kind of see a character like, okay, this girl knows what she's doing, and I immediately felt safer with her. I don't know. So yeah, I just kind of wanted your take on this Jane character and what you first thought of when you met her, and if they're kind of similar to my points there, mate.
I feel like Jane is like a necessary character if you're speaking from a female point of view, because like, let's face it, at the minute Clem's the one that's doing everything anyway. But you've got like a character like Rebecca, who's obviously pregnant, you know, vulnerable. A character like Sarah, who's, you know, obviously she portrays herself very much as like a victim, you know, and that's obviously because of Carlos, you know, she's not been hardened for this world. So you needed a female that was quite street smart. And then you've obviously there's Bonnie, but I don't think even she resonates quite as much like that. So you needed a character like Jane, similar to like, yeah, Molly from season 1, just to sort of bring something to the table, like that whole covering yourself in guts. You know, she just looks able. You feel like she is competent, and it's honestly what you were saying, mate. She brings that to the table. Like, whereas I feel like Pete had that in the group before, you've now got that in Jane.
Yeah, for sure. Really fascinating character, and rest assured, guys, we will talk more about Jane in future episodes, and I reckon she's going to get solo videos as well. So look out for those. Let's segue into the 400 Days bunch, mate. Now, we always wondered what role these guys would play. Because obviously, the moment we see Tavia at the start, we're like, okay, yeah. And then, you know, we found out Bonnie. We kind of clocked on, yeah, this is clearly the 400 Days group that we're meeting right here. So, like, we've discussed Bonnie a little bit. Clearly, she's someone who, like, betrays you. But the moment we get talking with her, because we have 2 shifts with her throughout the game, she is really apologetic. She gets you this coat, and she's like, I had no idea that, like, they would do this and this to you. Carver, like, oh my God, he's actually doing bad things. I'm so sorry. I regret it. And then she's immediately in on her plan. I know you didn't tell her, but about Luke, but I just wanted to ask, did you forgive Bonnie at any point? Do you think now you betrayed us, you sold us to the prison? What was your opinion on Bonnie?
I guess, like, my opinion on her is, I guess it's very sort of wishy-washy. Like, she's not, I certainly didn't forgive her because of obviously that the thing at the lodge. When she started to show, you know, signs that she was coming round, I was like, yeah, you know, sure, okay, she's sort of seen the light, what Carver actually is. Then obviously skipping forward a couple of episodes, you know, she completely goes and ruins it again. So like, my sort of overall view on her is that, you know, she's ultimately out for herself. You know, like, she might say a good line, she might feed you something that sounds, you know, appetizing, but like, ultimately, yeah, she's not a character that I'm completely enamored with. I prefer her to Mike, but I do, ironically, considering they end up going off together, I do put them in a similar-ish bracket, mate. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, I quite like Bonnie. I feel like, probably could have wrote her slightly better in scenarios. I feel like back then in the day, I immediately forgave her because I was like, a 17-year-old kid and she was a female with a pulse. But playing it again, I would be less forgiving because I'm like, no, fuck you. You betrayed us. You sold us out to this Carver group. Now we're prisoners. Some of us have died. You're probably a direct result of that. I actually enjoyed seeing you play as Savage Clem. Like, he's like, oh yeah, we got work here. You've got beds. It's like, so a prison. And then she's like, no, there's this and that. And then you're like, yeah, that's exactly what a prison is. And it was just really funny seeing Savage Clem attack her, especially given the ugly coat she gives you as well. But yeah, interesting. But obviously, apart from Bonnie though, mate, we get the cameos from the others. Now, you can sporadically see the other 4 characters, depending on if they came with you from the 400 Days chapter, because that is determinant as well. You've voiced in the past, haven't you, a bit of displeasure around the fact that they're reduced to slight cameos. So I wanted to ask, is that true? And also, how would you probably have got around that?
The greedy gamer in me would always like to see a little bit more. The thing is that don't get me wrong, I'm glad that they're there, and I do like the fact that your decisions from 400 Days do actually impact this season. Going into this one, I don't think they did, because the last time I played 400 Days was on my 360 console, so there's no way it would have transferred. It would just randomized it. I've been thinking about this, and obviously you've got a character like Tavia there. You could potentially drop her back. Then you've got a character like Troy. Now, as a supporting character, I don't mind Troy. He reminds me of Ben. If you imagine Ben grown up, it sort of looks like him a little bit, and he's clearly violent. But I was thinking, wouldn't it be great if that character, you just dropped Troy, and maybe you could have a Vince or a Wyatt or a Shell even. You could go female on it, and they're the exact same character as Troy, but they've turned. They're really in for Carver, and really agree with his methods and whatnot. And that might be a playing with expectations thing with the player. Holy shit! I remember playing as you in 400 Days, and you was a good person. Now you're fully on board with whatever Carver's going for. So maybe that's a potential way around it. But again, you're literally dealing with 5 characters here. To shoehorn them in as well as the others. I mean, you know what? Thinking on my feet, maybe you could replace Mike with one of them. Maybe not all of the 400 Days characters worked for Carver. Maybe some of them were prisoners as well. So maybe there's 2 suggestions, mate. But I don't know. I like the cameos. I do think there could have been a little bit more. But it's not something I'm going to lose sleep about.
Yeah, exactly. Because I feel like a cameo is better than nothing. I feel like it's cool we got something. However, the greedy side of me as well also thinks the same as you. And I didn't have any ideas myself. I kind of threw that question on you, but I'm fully in your corner. I actually think that's a really good idea. The fact that you have this Troy and George that walked up to the ski lodge in the last episode, just fucking replace them with Vince and Wild, Vince and Russell or something. I completely agree with that, lad. Right, one thing I wanted to do, lad, as well, is that in your playthrough for this episode, you left 2 characters behind in Alvin and Nick. I just wanted to ask you, do you know what happens to them? And if not, would you like me to fill you in with the roles they play in episode 3?
Oh, please do, because I don't know what happens to them at all.
Cool. So we'll start off with Nick. Now, Nick can will survive this episode. He will go all the way through to episode 4. However, he will act as a complete background character. He's there for dialogues. He'll just sort of sit in the prison. He'll just go off to work. Pretty much not really affecting the story at all. One thing which was pretty interesting is that, when Luke's around the fire saying, now our group's depleted, now is not a good time to go out and do this plan. This was before we had someone blow their eye out kind of thing. Nick will be backing Luke. He will be completely on his side, his brother's corner there. And when Reggie appears at the start, Nick will kind of take a guilt angle for his guilt arc to sort of say, oh, it's my fault, you lost your arm. Reggie will reassure him it wasn't, but it kind of leads you to suspect that maybe Nick was at fault for, like, you know, that whole thing, you know, helping them escape. And then, I don't know, like, Nick has some form of blame in that because he's on a kind of a bit of a losing streak in terms of decision making recently. So yeah, that's one thing that's interesting, but ultimately probably a little disappointing that he is very much background in this episode, mate.
Okay, I mean, I've got to admit, I'm not surprised because I do know that Alvin dies no matter what, right? I think that's what you're going to tell me. So I was thinking to myself, if Nick does default and get to episode 4, and he is probably going to be a little bit background. And again, this is that a symptom classic Telltale, isn't it? We've seen it in The Expanse. You know, it's not something that's changed really. If a character makes it past a point where they're going to die, they are naturally going to feature a little bit less. So I don't actually particularly miss that. I feel like Nick died at the right time in my playthrough, if I had to say it out.
Yeah, you said it right. He will die in this episode. He basically at the very start, because Carver just, you know, he wants like Rebecca, or, you know, and the kid all to himself really, that he will basically just like bully Alvin this episode. The moment you guys get out the lorry at the start, he takes him aside, goes, no, I've got something, I need you over here kind of thing. And he basically just lives up in the office and Alvin will be gone. And he basically, I think the whole episode, he just lives up in that office and Carver basically tortures him. So like, you know, like when you're going through the episode, you can kind of look through like the ceiling and you can like look down into the office. Yeah. You will see Alvin in that spot. And then later on when you try to sneak and, you know, sort out the thing with the speaker, Alvin will be there. And you know how you simply propped the door and like sort of shut it? You managed it yourself. Clem won't do that with Alvin. Instead, Alvin will be at the desk and sort of, you know, gets the pistol out of his drawer and then will like buy you time. And I think a guard will like sort of shoot Alvin and then Alvin shoots the guard. Guard dies and then he kind of like, you know, says some final words saying, oh, I've run out of road. One cool quote that he says, because he goes out like an absolute hero. It is a really cool final death for someone to help your group out. One cool thing he says is, please like look after my girls. I get the feeling it's going to be a girl before he dies. So that's just a nice little nugget of info you probably never knew.
Yeah, so actually, like where I feel like Nick died at the right place in my playthrough, I'd say that actually, yeah, I'd have quite liked to have kept Alvin around because that sounds like a very, as you know, a very sort of fitting ending, and I'd quite like to see that actually now. Yeah, no, for sure, lad. I mean, that kind of gets to the end of the episode. There are a few bullet point things I want to mention. So we mentioned it every episode, the whole thing of like Clem doing everything for everyone, being like a, you know, as you titled this episode, the 11-year-old adult. And to top that as well, like you've got the whole scene at the start where like, you know, Kenny's trying to undo the cuffs, and very similar to episode 2, season 1, where he's locked in the freezer, isn't it? He's like, we need to escape or we're just going to be like, you know, like rats in a cage, just like picking off to die here kind of thing. And everyone's yelling at him to sit down and stay still and like, you know, be a good prisoner basically. And when you chime in, Carlos says to you, Clem, stop, the adults are talking. And it made me laugh because I was like, I've been more adult than you, you know, like I've like basically fixed a windmill, I've got up ladder, scouted, like what have you done, Carlos, honestly? He just struck his daughter. That's basically what he's done for like the whole thing. Yeah. Honestly, yeah, massively, lad. The one thing I wanted to mention as well was like Luke in this episode. Like he kind of like sneaks about. I really like the dynamic, and then eventually he gets captured. But it is kind of cool to see he's a little bit outside, and there is that mystery of him at the start. I don't know about you, lad, but when you first come up to him in the comic store, where he kind of puts his hand over your mouth, he looked a little pale to me. And I think in my blind playthrough, I actually suspected, oh my god, Luke's bitten. Did you? I did not notice that at all. So that's completely missed to me, mate. But I mean, yeah. it would have been a nice little twist if he was somehow infected. Don't know. But yeah, I mean, I'm guessing him being out on his own, outside, very little supplies. I mean, yeah, you're probably going to show it. It's going to show on your skin some way, isn't it? So yeah, maybe that's it. Or it's just, you know, us, you know, over analysing it.
That's it. And the last person I wanted to mention, really, mate, is Kenny, because we spoke about him a little bit this episode, but it's interesting for me because I've got a love-hate relationship with Kenny, and one thing that really kind of stuck out to me is that my opinion on him this episode really wavered. At the start, I was like, be a good prisoner, sit the fuck down, stop, like, you know, causing a scene. And then he's like, oh yeah, Clem needs to do this and that. And then he's just having a go at everyone. And then he's like, you know, immediately like, we need to get out of this prison, whether you agree with that or not. But then he's like hero as well, where he like kind of like, you know, takes the walkie-talkie blame for you, loses an eye for it. And then, you know, the fact that, what is the other thing he does? He does, oh yeah, just the cool badass return where everyone's like, yeah, we're not in a fit state to leave, and then he just kind of gets out of his bed like, nah, we're leaving. And I was just like, Kenny, like, you can't deny the fact that although, yeah, like, it's a love-hate relationship, he is a tough cookie, and I like you've always said time and time again, he is a really well-written character.
Plus, he obviously kills Carver as well, doesn't he? So, like, he's someone, like, you know, if you're anti-Kenny, yeah, I mean, maybe you could say so Marmite. Maybe that's just a very easy thing to say. But, like, you'd want Kenny on your team, wouldn't you? Actually, like, even at the beginning, when he's... And again, like, it comes back to this thing that I was saying earlier on between, like, Carver and, what's-his-face, Reggie, is that, you know, what is the right thing to do? You know, you've got Kenny there who's, like... you know, the champion for freedom, really, and, you know, let's get out of here. And then, or is it wiser to be more compliant and be a prisoner where you're going to have everything but your freedom? Or would you rather have freedom but not have, you know, your food and your basic essentials and stuff? So yeah, like there was a lot actually going on, like, under the surface in this episode that I really liked, and, you know, as usual, Kenny's at the heart of it.
Yeah, that's it. So in conclusion, probably a good movie episode, but very linear, not much in the way of choices.
I think so.
But yeah, that concludes this episode, guys. Join us for next episode, guys, where we're going to look at Amid the Ruins. Thank you very much for joining us, and we will see you in the next one.
Catch you later.